This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Renee, and welcome to episode 2 of Beyond Contempt. This is not a typical story. In fact, you've probably never heard anything like it. Imagine having a happy existence. Then one incident changes the trajectory of your life. You're listening to Kelli Peters PTA. Irvine is a 66 square mile city in California with a population over 250,000. It is one of the nation's largest planned urban communities. Irvine is known as the Land of Oz because of its manicured lawns and immaculate streets. Irvine has been voted the safest city in America multiple years in a row by the FBI. It's a community that has little poverty because of its skilled and educated populace. In this affluent city, the median household income is over $95,000, and the average home price is over $800,000. There were two general types of moms who had kids at Plaza Vista School in Irvine, California. There were the kinds of moms who wore $500 jeans and designer shoes. Then there were the moms like Kelli Peters. It wouldn't be unheard of for her to be running errands in a baby doll dress with her John Lennon-style shades. Kelli came from a middle-class family. Her mom was a waitress and a horse trainer, while her dad was an insurance salesman and a part-time musician. She had grown up caring for her 3 younger brothers when her parents had to work nights. Kelli had lived a modest life and always had a job, even back when she was in high school. Kelli volunteered at Plaza Vista School when her daughter Sydney started kindergarten. Plaza Vista was a year-round school that had an organic garden out back and even had a climbing wall. Kelli felt lucky that she got to see her daughter at school, and it was the highlight of her day. She showed the kids how to tie their shoes, took them to the restroom, taught them their ABCs, and helped out with anything needed. The kids were always excited to see Kelli. They gave her hugs and told her about their day. The kids made Kelli feel special. She was proud to help the children and to be a part of their learning and growth. She didn't mind that she wasn't getting paid because it was so rewarding. Kelli returned to volunteer again for Sid's first grade year and was asked to run for the PTA. Kelli said yes, but then second-guessed herself. She was concerned that she lacked the experience, but Kelli won the PTA secretary role. It turns out that she was the only one who ran for the position. Her new volunteer job required that she attend and take notes at all the meetings. Most parents were too busy to participate, but they trusted the PTA to make the best decisions for their kids. Kelli continued to volunteer at the school and run for the PTA every year. The teachers and staff got to know her well and came to depend on her. She became a key part of the school and was great with the kids. The school had even given Kelli a desk in the office. She was witness to many of the dramas that some of the parents brought to the school administrators, from parents who demanded that the school place more umbrellas on the playground to shield their kids from the sun, to parents who demanded that the school fire a particular teacher because their child received a B in that class. Kelli had learned to deal with these disgruntled parents by smiling and being polite while conversing with them. Kelli won many awards and certificates of appreciation for her service to the school and to the PTA. She won the Volunteer of the Year award in 2011, which was a prestigious achievement. Kelli was the coordinator for the after-school program that started every day at 1:30. Kelli made sure that all the children were cared for and that the programs were running smoothly. Parent volunteers and teachers managed approximately 50 kids. The program offered a variety of classes, from sports to art to cooking. The kids often played outside in the supervised, fenced-in yard. There was not a formal sign-in or sign-out procedure, but the children would go to the front of the school, in the lineup area, where they were picked up by their parents. Kelli would make sure no children or parents were left over and that everyone went home. All the parents had to sign an agreement stating that they would pick up their children on time and if they were running late, they were supposed to contact Kelli. The program was safe and never had an incident. On 16 February 2011, Kelli walked through the Plaza Vista parking lot and headed into the school, which was like a second home to her. As Kelli headed into the building, she felt happy. She had a good relationship with her parents. Her marriage was great. She had many close friends, and she was lucky enough to have a fulfilling volunteer job where she felt valued. Plus, she got to see her daughter during the school day. What Kelli didn't realize was that her life was about to change forever. On that day, someone placed an anonymous call to the Irvine police at 1:15 p.m. This person reported that a woman was out of control at the Plaza Vista school. In an Indian accent, the male caller said he saw one of the parent volunteers from the after-school program driving erratically into the school parking lot, and she had something stashed behind her seat. She might be under the influence or using drugs, and he was concerned about the welfare of his child, who also attended the school. The 911 operator asked the caller his name. He said it was Vijay Chandrasekhar. He gave a description of the license plate and the car, a white PT Cruiser. He said the driver's name was Kelli. Officer Charles Shaver was a 22-year veteran from the Irvine PD. He arrived at the school and found the white PT Cruiser in the parking lot. He looked in the window and saw a Ziploc bag that was displayed in the pocket behind the driver's seat. Further action would need to be taken. A co-worker called Kelli out of an after-school program and told her that there was a police officer who wanted to speak with her. At first, she was terrified that something happened to her husband, Bill. Officer Shaver had informed Kelli that someone had reported her by name for erratic driving and drug possession. Kelli thought she was in a bad dream, considering she did not take drugs, and she was involved in the DARE program at school. Kelli asked what time the call came in. When the officer told her that someone placed the call at 1:15 p.m., Kelli told him that she had arrived to school at 11:30 a.m. that morning and was in the office during that time. Then at 1:15, she was getting kids off to their classes. The officer said he needed to look inside her car. 49-year-old Kelli's hands were shaking as she dug her keys out and tried to hang on to them. They walked to her PT Cruiser, which was blocked in by the officer's police car. There was even a helicopter circling overhead. Kelli was shocked when she saw a large Ziploc bag that contained something that looked like marijuana and was sitting in plain sight behind her driver's seat. Kelli consented to a search of her vehicle. The net result was 17 grams of marijuana, a pipe, 2 small easy-dose pill pouch bags with 11 Percocet and 29 Vicodin. The officer placed the drugs on the hood of the car while kids, parents, and teachers were watching the scene unfold. Kelli could not contain her tears. "These drugs aren't mine. Please take them off the car so the kids can't see them. My daughter can't see them." Kelli walked to a conference room in the school with the police officer. The room was one that was surrounded by windows, so everyone could see in. Kelli received a field sobriety test, where she said her ABCs forwards and backwards. She walked a line, then turned around. On command, she put a finger to her nose. The officer shined a light in her mouth and eyes. She passed all the tests with flying colors. The officer said, "If the drugs aren't yours, how did they get there?" Kelli said that someone must have planted them. The veteran officer was at the end of his shift. He could have arrested Kelli and called it a day, but something bothered him. The school confirmed that Kelli arrived before the 911 call was placed. The experienced officer knew people did not leave bags of marijuana in their car out in the open. People hid drugs in the glove box or under the car seat. Officer Shaver asked Kelli if she had any enemies. She thought about the question for a few seconds. Then the answer became obvious. "Yes, actually, I do have an enemy. Jill Easter." Kelli had remembered the incident even though it took place a year ago, on February 17, 2010, when she interacted with Jill Easter for the first and only time. Jill went to pick up her 6-year-old son from an after-school tennis program, the program that Kelli Peters was in charge of. When Jill arrived late to Plaza Vista School, she realized that her son wasn't in his normal waiting spot. The boy was outside with his tennis coach, who had brought him around front to the pickup area. Kelli had recalled that the boy wasn't upset or crying. Jill had asked Kelli about the situation. Kelli explained that sometimes kids stay back and help their teachers clean up. This was likely why her son was brought to the front area by the tennis coach. This answer seemed to satisfy Jill, and she left. A few minutes later, Jill returned and wanted another explanation why the tennis coach brought her son up to the front of the school. Kelli explained again that if he took a tennis lesson and the kids are slow to line up, the coach or teacher will escort them to the pickup area. Now, Kelli Peters had said Jill's son was slow to line up. On that day, Kelli was trying to tell Jill that her son was sometimes slow to move. He was a child prone to daydreams and often liked to help his teachers clean up. He was genuinely a nice kid. However, what Jill must have heard was something entirely different. She perceived Kelli's statement to mean that her kid was slow, as in intellectually slow. The conversation continued, and Jill became verbally forceful. Now Jill said her son had been crying outside for 20 minutes. Kelli did a quick calculation. Jill's statement was not accurate. Class ended at 2:30. Kelli waited by the front door until 2:35, like she normally did, to make sure all the kids were matched with their parents. Jill must have arrived to school late at 2:40, the same time the tennis coach had to leave to teach his next class, which started at 2:45. The coach must have brought Jill's son up the same time she arrived at school. Jill said her son should have been waiting for her. Kelli again explained that they give the kids 5 minutes to line up, and they get picked up between 2:30 and 2:35. If a child stayed back to help the teacher, then situations like this can arise. It is the child's responsibility to line up for parent pickup, but the teachers, coaches, and volunteers all pitch in to help the kids out. Jill again said, "Don't you think it's odd that my son came up with the tennis coach?" She was attempting to get Kelli to go along with her version of the story, and insinuated that the coach had done something to her son. Kelli was not going along with this. She apologized, but explained to Jill that the tennis coach brought her son up to the front of the school because he is her son's teacher, and that her son just took an hour-long tennis lesson and he might have stayed back to help clean up. Jill reassured Kelli that she was not blaming her and seemed okay with Kelli's answer. Jill and her son left for the second time. Kelli wondered to herself if she should have brought up that Jill was late, but she brushed it off. A few moments later, Jill returned for a third time, this time without her son. Again, she asked Kelli if she thought it was strange that the tennis coach brought her son to the pickup area. Jill said that it was odd, and she didn't like it. She wanted to know why her son was crying, because something must have happened. Jill said that the tennis coach molested her son because his face was dirty. She said that it looks like someone forced him down into the mud. Kelli thought this woman was crazy, and she would not allow her to accuse an innocent man of this. Jill did not rush her kid to the hospital or call the police, which is what most parents would do if they honestly thought someone had touched their kid. Kelli said his face was dirty because he just got done taking a tennis lesson on black asphalt. Jill kept repeating several times that her son was molested. Kelli refused to give in to this crazy bully, who seemed accustomed to getting her way. Kelli had enough and would not continue this insane conversation. She didn't get paid for this, and she was just a volunteer. The tennis coach was an amazing man who only had a few minutes to pack up to get to his next lesson. Kelli told Jill goodbye and walked away. Jill screamed at the top of her lungs, "I'll get you!" Kelli was in shock after hearing this threat, and it had sent shivers down her spine. She went inside the school and cried. She called her supervisor and filed an incident report. Many of the school officials did not take this threat seriously. They had no clue what lay ahead. The conflict did not end there. Jill was furious and went on a tirade. The day after the incident, Jill Easter handed out flyers to parents in the school parking lot that accused Kelli of leaving her son locked out of school and unsupervised. She blamed Kelli and demanded that the school fire her. Jill even accused Kelli of dragging her son to the back of the school and blooding his knuckles. When Kelli told her husband about the flyers, he told her to be careful. He said, "Jill Easter doesn't sound right in the head." Jill continued to smear Kelli's reputation among school parents. A few days later, Jill switched to standing in front of the school during pickup so she could tell everyone that Kelli tried to hurt her child. She petitioned the school's principal to have Kelli removed from her volunteer duties. The Easters accused her of leaving their son unattended for long periods of time, which caused him to have anxiety attacks. Jill went up the ladder and also complained to the school district. Jill threatened that her son wouldn't return to Plaza Vista if Kelli remained working there. The school told Jill that Kelli was the best volunteer they had. They would not remove her until a full investigation was performed. The school interviewed the tennis coach, and the situation had unfolded as Kelli suspected. The Easter's son had lagged behind, and the coach brought him up to the school. When he found the back door locked, he brought the boy around to the pickup area in front. Kelli and the tennis coach had done nothing wrong, per the school and the police, who both had investigated the matter via the Easter's insistence. The school would not remove Kelli Peters and offered Jill her son's tuition money back. Even though Kelli had done nothing wrong, this had damaged her reputation. The after-school program was also a casualty in the war launched by Jill Easter. Enrollment had declined by 20%. Kelli tried to resign, but the school wouldn't let her. The Easters continued their escalation. There was a restraining order placed against Kelli. Jill claimed Kelli stalked her and tried to kill her. The court threw the restraining order out. A month later, the Easters filed a civil suit, claiming Kelli had locked their son out of school for 19 minutes. They claimed that this was false imprisonment and infliction of emotional distress that was done in an intentional and malicious manner. The courts quickly dismissed this case. Every time Jill sued, Kelli had to have repeated sit-downs with the school's attorneys and go over every ounce of the conversation she had with Jill on the day of the incident. These meetings lasted for hours, and they left no stone unturned. Kelli was fortunate that the school paid for an attorney to combat all the lawsuits filed by the Easters. Many started wondering, who are the Easters? Kent Easter went to Stanford for undergrad and completed a law degree at UCLA in 1998. He was a former associate at a law firm in Palo Alto and then went to work as a securities litigation partner for a law firm in Newport Beach. Jill graduated from Berkeley Law in 1998. She eventually became an associate at the same Palo Alto law firm where she met her husband Kent. After the couple married, Jill became a stay-at-home mom for their 3 kids and let her bar membership lapse. Jill had also written crime novels under the pen name Ava Bjork. Jill's parents lived in one of the wealthiest sections of Newport Beach. Many people had opinions about Jill Easter. Sometimes she could be friendly and social under certain circumstances, but many found her self-righteous, standoffish, and smug. As the months rolled by, Kelli tried to focus on her volunteer position at school. She would work on a project and would glance up to see Jill Easter peering through the window at her. When she saw that Kelli was looking, Jill would flip her the bird. During this time, Kelli received hateful and threatening emails sent to her PTA and personal accounts. The stress was getting to Kelli. Her hair fell out and she was having panic attacks. She cried all the time, and she would even break down at school. She could not sleep through the night. Kelli watched her daughter like a hawk and wouldn't let her outside for fear that Jill Easter would try to harm her. She felt Jill was stalking her, which was later confirmed by the police. Kelli would sometimes see Jill's car following her. On a trip to Costco, she heard Jill's voice right behind her. Kelli called friends to help her walk her dog because she didn't want to be alone. She had nightmares about Jill sneaking into her house and slitting her throat. She continued to show up at places that Kelli had frequented. Jill had even told the school admin she would hide in the bushes to make sure that Kelli was following all the school's rules. Kelli's family stopped going out to restaurants. Her daughter was being bullied at school. Kelli's husband was about to retire, And it worried her that they would have to spend his retirement savings on legal fees fighting something that she didn't do. One day at the dog park, a woman approached Kelli and tried way too hard to befriend her. The stranger was the only one in the park who did not have a dog. She told Kelli that she was a dog sitter and she would like to come to her house to watch her pet. Kelli asked her questions about rates and references. The woman had perfect answers for everything and stressed that she would love to come to Kelli's house and watch her dog there. Kelli told her that she had friends that help with pet sitting. The stranger left the park and did not offer her services to anyone else. This woman obviously wanted access to Kelli's apartment. This was not the last time Kelli would see this person, who had even followed her in her car. Another time, she ran over to greet Kelli and her dog when she saw them out walking. Later, Kelli would learn that this woman was a private investigator hired by the Easters. This wasn't the only person to stalk Kelli. A man in a silver car followed her every time she drove somewhere. She was walking her dog one day and then saw this man driving next to her on the street as he peered at her through the window. Kelli was petrified and ran home. This man would even park his car close to Kelli's bedroom window. When Kelli had spoken to the tennis coach at school, he said the same man was watching him too. The coach confronted the stalker in the silver vehicle, and they ended up going inside for a cup of coffee and a chat. It turns out the Easters had hired him to follow both Kelli and the coach. They had wanted the private investigator to catch them having an affair. After this, the harassment stopped. Kelli noticed that Jill was avoiding her. The anonymous threatening email stopped, the police report stopped, the lawsuit stopped, and the gossip stopped. As Kelli sat in the windowed conference room of the school, having just successfully passed the field sobriety test, police wanted to search her property. She allowed them to search her apartment and take fingerprints and DNA swabs from everyone in her family. It took 2 long months, but Kelli was cleared by the police. Their forensic investigation found nothing. There was no DNA evidence from the Peters family on the drugs found in Kelli's car. Even though Kelli was cleared of this crime, most people were not aware of it. Kelli found a therapist to help her deal with the stress, and even this person did not believe her. The therapist said, "How did you get out of that? Nobody gets out of that." At school, people avoided Kelli. Parents who used to say hi to her now turned their heads when she passed by. People would honk their horns at her when she walked her dog. The police realized this whole situation was not adding up, and Kelli must have an enemy. They looked into the drug planting theory, which seemed plausible. The first suspect on their list was not Jill Easter, but another man who lived near the school and made everyone nervous. This man had expressed wanting to take Kelli's PTA job and even asked for copies of the PTA bylaws. He was known for his strange behavior, which included hanging out on school grounds without permission, heckling crossing guards, and wearing a Batman suit when he picked up his son after school. He painted the word security on the front of his car and filmed parents because he wanted to catch them running stop signs. Authorities knew this man well. There was no evidence tying him to the drugs in Kelli's car, and he had a solid alibi on the eve of the drug planting crime. Police still decided to keep him as a person of interest. As police chased down leads, they started to believe the Easters belonged on the list of suspects. The male who placed the 911 call had left a fake phone number and address. He stuttered and offered more information than a typical 911 caller would. It was almost like he was reading off a script. He started out with an American accent, then midway through used a half-hearted Indian accent. They traced the original 911 call to a hotel 11 miles away from Irvine. When police reviewed the CCTV footage from the hotel, they expected to see the Batman dad. Instead, they witnessed a lanky man who looked like Kent Easter walking into the hotel right before the 911 call was placed and showed him leaving right after the call finished. This hotel also happened to be across the street from Kent Easter's place of employment. It appeared that Batman Dad was innocent, although later on he would be arrested for pretending to be a security guard and pulling out a gun on a high school campus. The CCTV evidence allowed police to file warrants for the Easters' cell phone records and electronic GPS data. They discovered the Easters' phones had pinged off cell towers that were close to Kelli's home the night the drugs were planted. Kent had also texted his wife 15 times while he was in the parking lot, which showed that they both conspired to commit this crime. Police also filed warrants for DNA evidence. They took swabs from both Easters. Jill's DNA was found on the pipe and the Vicodin pills, but not the Percocet, and Kent's DNA was found on all 3 items. Even in the face of all this evidence, the Easters were not talking to police. It would come out later in the investigation that Jill was arriving late to school when picking up her son because she was having an affair. Her boyfriend was a married firefighter named Glenn Gomez, and they had been together for 2.5 years. Glenn would visit Jill at her home when Kent was at the law office working 60-hour weeks. Detectives confronted Glenn and got him to wear a wire. They wanted him to get information about what Jill had done to Kelli Peters. Glenn agreed, and he met Jill at a park. He wanted to know why the police were asking him questions. Jill said she didn't know why. Glenn told her that if she did nothing wrong, she would be fine. Jill said, "I'm not going to be fine. Do you understand me?" This was the most that he could get her to say. Glenn broke up with her shortly after this conversation. Jill showed up at his Long Beach home and showed his wife email and photo evidence of their affair. Later on, she crafted a letter in the third person, as if it were a close friend writing the note, and sent it to Glenn's wife at her place of employment. The letter further detailed her affair with the woman's firefighter husband. As usual, Jill always had to have the last word. Kelli was working in the office at the school, and there was a major commotion with several reporters hanging around outside. Kelli's phone rang, and it was DA Chris Duff, letting her know that they had arrested the Easters. After enduring 2 years of hell, there would be justice. Kelli's phone was buzzing nonstop. Every news station in the state and many around the country wanted to talk to her about the arrests. The Easters' lawyers had told them that the situation would be handled delicately. If police were to arrest them, they would receive advance notice so they could have bail ready and be in and out of booking quickly. However, the Irvine police had something else in mind. They didn't record the warrants electronically, so the Easters received no advance warning when the police came for them. They arrested Kent at a busy intersection while he was on his way to work, and they picked up Jill at her house. Bail was set at $20,000 each, which they had no problem posting. The Easters' mugshots were plastered all over the news. In the meantime, the Easters sued every party they could for defamation: the Los Angeles Times, the Irvine Police Department, the Orange County District Attorney's Office, and John Doe's 1 through 100. The Easters alleged that there were numerous false statements circulated by the authorities, and the LA Times republished all those false statements. One of the John Doe defendants was the author of an anonymous review on Amazon.com for Jill Easter's crime novel, Holding House. The review was written by someone called School Volunteer and stated, "The description of this book is totally misleading. I thought I was about to read a book about how a firefighter and 2 other people planned the perfect crime. Instead, the story is about a couple of sleazy lawyers and parents that try to frame an enemy by planting drugs on that enemy, and then, in a totally unbelievable narrative, manage to make every mistake imaginable, and of course get caught by the police. I'm sorry, but no 2 people could be so stupid as to think that they would get away with their heinous acts. Whoever wrote this book should try a different topic next time, maybe a gritty prison drama." The Easters claim that the statement in the review was false because the book does not have a misleading description, and it has nothing to do with a story about planting drugs on an enemy, and the author, Jill Easter, is not a sleazy lawyer and parent that made every mistake imaginable. As a side note, I could not find this review on Amazon. However, as of this date, there are 34 other published reviews, many of which are not flattering. Strangers had abused Kelli, and she endured this situation for years. Some people confronted her, and others remained upset in silence, only to surface when she least expected. At a grocery store, a woman had approached Kelli and asked her for forgiveness. Kelli was confused and wanted to know why. Kelli thought to herself, had this woman been someone who sent threatening emails or voicemails? Had this person yelled out the window of the car at Kelli as she walked her dog? The woman said she had been a friend of the Easters. She was supposed to be with Kent and Jill the night they planted the drugs. Jill had canceled their plans last minute, and had convinced this woman that Jill wanted to use her family as an alibi. The woman apologized for believing all the lies about Kelli harming children. This woman was religious, and she needed Kelli's forgiveness to move on. But then she said she thought Kent was innocent. Kelli told the woman that they have Kent on video, and that he was the one who called 911. The woman told Kelli that she was wrong about Kent. Kelli left the grocery store, realizing that even with the Easters being arrested, people still didn't see the truth. The Easters were charged with conspiracy to procure a false arrest, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to falsely report a crime. They used the cops to frame Kelli, which did not sit well with DA Chris Duff. The Easters gave attorneys a bad name. The DA would not allow them to plead to misdemeanors. They would face felony charges, which put their law licenses in jeopardy. They set Jill's court date for sometime in October 2013. On the eve of her trial, Jill took a plea deal and agreed to false imprisonment. Her sentence was 120 days in jail with no home confinement. This was important because wealthy people often serve their time on house arrest. Jill would have to do her time in Orange County Jail and would have a felony on her record. She served less than half her sentence and performed 100 hours of community service at a local soup kitchen. Kent did not take a plea deal and went to trial. The DA felt that Jill's guilty plea was a strategy employed by the Easters for Jill to take the blame to save Kent's law license and income. He pled not guilty and portrayed himself as a beaten-down cuckold husband whose wife called the shots. Kent took the stand in his own defense and told the jury that Jill planted the drugs without his knowledge. Jill had convinced Kent to call the police on Kelli. The DA refuted every point the defense made. He even showed evidence that both Kent and Jill's cell phones pinged the tower by Kelli's apartment the night the drugs were planted. Kent's 911 call was replayed in court. The juror seemed amused by his terrible fake accent. The DA pointed out that Kent had given a bogus name to the 911 operator of J. Chandrasekhar, who was a famous Indian-American actor who starred in movies like Beer Fest, Jackass 2, and Super Troopers. This was another way the DA demonstrated that the defendant was a liar. The video footage of Kent was key. It had allowed law enforcement to file the warrant for the DNA swab, which showed the Easters had planted the drugs. Closing statements were given by both attorneys. Then the waiting began. Hours turned into days, and Kelli passed the time by pacing around her apartment. She just wanted it to be over. The verdict came back, but one juror was holding out. The juror thought that Kent was guilty, but believed that he should receive a misdemeanor instead of a felony. The judge tried to explain that this wasn't a decision for the jury. If a juror thought the defendant was guilty, she was supposed to vote guilty. The juror didn't feel that the punishment fit the crime. She refused to convict him and voted not guilty. The judge declared a mistrial. Kelli was deflated. During the second trial, Kent's defense strategy shifted slightly. His wife cheated on him with a firefighter, and he had to frame Kelli Peters to win her back. His defense lawyer had painted him as a bumbling fool who was put on this earth to do his wife's bidding. A honey-do list was admitted into evidence. The note gave Kent a long list of tasks that he was supposed to complete in 24 hours, which included exhausting the criminal code against Kelli and filing lawsuits against everyone connected with the incident. All 12 jurors decided he was guilty. They sentenced him to 6 months in jail and 3 years of probation. He only served 76 days. Kent's law firm fired him and wiped all mentions of him from their website. His $400,000 per year salary was gone. Jill and Kent Easter were both disbarred in 2014. Jill divorced Kent and changed her name to Ava Easter, then changed her name again to Ava Everhart. She also changed the last name of her 3 children to Everhart. The divorce settlement was finalized in January of 2016. Kent was to pay $8,000 per month in child support and $4,000 per month in spousal support. After much convincing, Kelli Peters decided to sue the Easters for humiliating her and her family. Kelli had panic attacks and cried much of the time. Kelli's husband had insomnia and had panic attacks as well. He ended up seeing a psychologist who diagnosed him with major depressive disorder. Their daughter Sydney was only 10 when the drugs were planted. Sid was terrified to go to her room, thinking Jill Easter would be there to kidnap her. Her friends wanted to know why her mom had hurt Jill Easter's son. Soon, she had no one to play with at all, and ate alone at lunch. Kelli started taking her out for lunch, and Sid would just cry as they ate together. Kelli enrolled Sid in a different school for his 7th grade year. She would have dropped the lawsuit if the Easters would have said they were sorry and had shown some remorse, but that was unlikely to happen. They filed the civil complaint back on August 3, 2012, with claims of intentional infliction of emotional distress and false imprisonment. Jury selection began in February 2016. Kelli walked in the courtroom and saw Kent Easter. As he passed by her, Kent gave her a cold stare. Kelli felt sick to her stomach and ran to the bathroom where she vomited. Kent represented himself at the civil case. Instead of the expensive suits he had worn at the criminal trial, he wore the same old sweater every day at court. He didn't wear a belt and had to keep pulling his pants up as they fell down his backside. When Kent called his ex-wife, Ava Everhart, to the stand, she had a sign language interpreter because she claimed to be deaf. She dressed down for the court to show that she had no money. She told everyone that she was poor and that she was from a Native American reservation in Minnesota. On the stand, Jill said she has 3 kids and volunteers 3 times more than Kelli Peters does. She said kids love her, and she works tirelessly to help children. Jill stated that all she does is cook, clean, and volunteer. Kelli thought to herself, well, Jill certainly does more than that, since it was in the court record that she had a long-term extramarital affair with a firefighter, and she had spent her time sexting with him several times a day and had sex with him at her home when Kent was at work. Kelli had never seen Jill volunteer at school, and now that Jill was a felon, she probably could not volunteer with children. During a court recess, a juror told the judge that he had witnessed Jill talking to Kent Easter without an interpreter. He said that she must not really be deaf. The judge told him to use his common sense to assess the credibility of the witness. Jill's testimony continued. She said she had nothing to do with the crime. This was despite her DNA being found on the drugs and being convicted of planting the drugs. Kelli couldn't stand listening to all these lies. She got up and sat on a bench outside the courtroom during the rest of the testimony. When Kelli's lawyer cross-examined Kent Easter, Kent tried to convey that they were poor. To discredit his claim, Kelli's lawyer produced a copy of Jill's boarding pass for a trip to a resort in Mexico. Kent had faxed this to the attorney in error. It took the jury less than an hour to deliberate. They awarded the Peters family $5.7 million in total damages. They awarded Kelli $365,000 in compensatory damages for false imprisonment, $800,000 for emotional distress. Bill Peters was awarded $365,000, and Sid received $600,000 for emotional distress. $1.5 million in punitive damages for malice, oppression, and fraud against Kent Easter, and $2.1 million against Ava. After his arrest, Kent had transferred his Irvine home to his father-in-law. He also filed for bankruptcy before they issued the civil fines, but was told that this would have no bearing on the money that he owed. Kent settled with Kelli Peters, but Ava continued to appeal the decision. On December 21, 2017, Ava Everhart did not show up in court for oral arguments. Kelli's attorney speculated that Ava did not want her new name associated with the ruling. Another possibility is that Ava left the country. Around this time, her Facebook page said she was in a romantic relationship and lived in Havana, Cuba. In a recent interview with the Orange County Register, Peters wiped away her tears and said, "This was not really about money. This was about standing up to people that pick on other people and telling them it's not okay to do this. I feel like justice has been served." Peters said that the couple expressed no remorse. "I think saying sorry goes a long way. It would have gone a long way with me in the beginning. I wouldn't have gone this far had they said they were sorry." Kelli Peters and her friends threw a party to celebrate the victory. They bought a piñata and placed mugshots of the Easters on the heart-shaped object. After 6 long years, the Easter monsters were a thing of the past. Ava Everhart went on Dr. Phil. She thought that going on the show would convince people that she did not play a role in destroying Kelli Peters' life. She was wrong. The OC Weekly, an online news source for Orange County and Long Beach, reported that she came off looking bad and was delusional. She denied ever handing out flyers that smeared Kelli's reputation. Dr. Phil played the infamous 911 call and asked her several times if that was her ex-husband's voice. She refused to answer. She accused Kelli of stalking and threatening her. When Dr. Phil pressed her for more specific details, Ava could only come up with unspecified threats. Dr. Phil interviewed Kelli Peters separately and asked her if she thinks Jill Easter is evil. Kelli responded, "Oh, definitely. She needs to own it, man. She was busted." Christopher Goffard, the LA Times reporter, published a piece on the Kelli Peters story called Framed, A Mystery in 6 Parts. In an interview, Christopher said if the story would have taken place in Anaheim or Santa Ana, where the cops are busy with violent crime, that the outcome for Kelli Peters might be very different. The Irvine PD had 20 detectives on this case, and there are murders every day in Southern California that don't get 20 detectives. The Irvine police were used by the Easters to hurt one of their citizens, and this made it personal. The police force had the time and the resources to scrutinize the case, and that is what they did. There was a debate in the LA Times newsroom if this crime could have happened anywhere but Irvine. Goffard concluded this crime could have hatched in any rich city, but it wouldn't be solved in just any rich city. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please check out the 6-part LA Times article by Christopher Goffard. It has links to audio, including the 911 call, and the conversation between Jill Easter and her firefighter boyfriend. For those unaware, Christopher Goffard is the same author who brought the Dirty John story to the podcasting world. Also, keep your eyes peeled for a movie that Netflix is developing, with Julia Roberts playing the part of Kelli Peters. My podcast recommendation this week is a series called Lords of Death. This is an investigative-style podcast by Thrasher Banks about a serial killer who went undetected in Ohio in the late 1980s. There is a major twist in episode 3 that will leave your jaw on the floor. I'll have a link to the podcast in the show notes for this episode. Please visit my website, beyondcontemptpodcast.com, for links to the sources and the music used in this episode. If you like talking about true crime cases, join the Beyond Contempt Podcast Facebook group. Please support the show by leaving a positive review in Apple Podcasts or share this episode on social media. And thanks for listening.